Hi there. So this is the second video as part of the Unit 16 video set. So in this video, we're going to focus on P2 and D1, which are really not that far removed from the previous criteria of P1, where you are starting to look at the impact of a smarter planet. Now we're going to be looking at the impact, first of all, on global society, and there's various different range of items that the awarding body want you to discuss, none of which, again, are particularly difficult or out there. D1 is also part of this task, so you can combine them together if you want to try and achieve them. Obviously, you could potentially do this in one of two ways, and I'll discuss those later in the video. So items that the awarding body identify that you could be discussing for the impact on global society of the smarter planet are things such as environmental issues, such as pollution and energy consumption. So the idea is, obviously, there's lots and lots of evidence that shows that global warming is something that is very real, despite the efforts of some politicians who would prefer you to think otherwise. But the vast majority of evidence out there suggests that climate change is a very real thing and is going on constantly. But this is obviously not a video on that specifically. But you will need to discuss the impact of the smarter planet on environmental issues. So this could include things such as the rise in environmental issues caused by electronic items that will enable for smarter devices. So if you're thinking about things like AI, if you have lots of data centers that have the processing requirements or the processing going on to enable AI, then your environmental impact, your environmental footprint is going to go up. So you're going to have to think about ways to get around that. Conversely, there are going to be things which improve the environmental footprint, such as, let's say, for example, there might have been things that you might have done that would have had an environmental impact, such as printing items off, or maybe having something real physical, and now you don't need that, you can have it electronically. There's lots and lots of information about all this stuff out there, and you'll find some quite strong opinions either way. Okay, and it's going to be up to you to read this stuff, form your own opinion, and not just kind of look for stuff that backs up your own opinion. Somebody who's good at research is able to look at all sides of a story and come to their own opinion. You've got ethical issues. Data privacy is clearly an issue of these smart devices. These items that people are using all the time, they're collecting and harvesting data constantly. And it's a real issue in terms of what are they then doing with your data, how are they storing your data, how are they ensuring that they're keeping it secure, and like I said, it is a real issue, and you're going to have to be thinking about how that could potentially happen. Maybe give some examples would be good. Also, the internet is obviously an ethical issue in terms of it's very, very easy to spread information. It's just an example, okay? Very, very easy to spread information which is untrue, and it's part of the modern landscape, really. I find that wherever you go, you find things which contradict each other. And again, it's up to you to read all of the materials that you come across and come to a decision as to which is more likely to be true, and not just assume that the first thing that you come across is the correct item. Now, there are other items there in terms of where you've got the internet. But obviously, it's linked to things like social issues. So where you've got communication, communication is unquestionably improved in some areas. It's much easier to communicate with people electronically than it's ever been before. It's much easier to keep in touch with people who maybe you would only previously have spoken to once a week via a telephone call, or maybe you met up to go do something socially. Now it's so easy just to be able to communicate with people via text message, social media message, whatever it might be. And there's so many different ways that you can do that. There's video sharing sites, which I personally don't use, but some of you guys might. It's so, like I said, so easy. to potentially do that. The downside to that is reduced face-to-face communication. And as a teacher, I see this all the time, where people's ability, especially young people's ability, to communicate with one another is being consistently threatened, I think could be a word, because they don't do it as much. Where you don't talk to people face to face, you're not going to get better at it. It's always something that happens in life. If you're not very good at something, if you then don't work on improving that thing, you're never going to get better at it. It doesn't happen by accident. And if you are reasonably good at something and then you don't do it, you're probably going to lose that ability, or going to get worse at that ability. So if people are not talking to each other or not communicating with each other, then people's ability to communicate face to face is not going to be as good. And there's various arguments out there in terms of, do people's lack of physical interaction with other people, does that have an impact on people's mental health, for example? And I'm sure that you could have a look at all kinds of different studies, and there's a lot of powerful studies out there on this. But you can have a look at a range of different studies, and again, come to your own conclusions about that. I would say it's clearly not going to be something that's going to be helpful to people. I guess it brings with them their own skills. It's like I said, it's a lot easier to communicate with people constantly, 24/7. Some people may find that's a good thing. I guess ultimately everybody's going to have their own opinions to that. You will have your own opinion to that. Certainly for younger people, it's all they know, it's all they've been brought up with. And if you're then going into a job which requires you to have face-to-face communication, is that helpful or not? Ultimately, exposure to threats online is a big thing. Now, it is absolutely true that there are lots of threats offline, and there are lots of threats wherever you go in life. However, you would also say that online there are threats that you wouldn't necessarily have if you just stayed off the internet. And just staying off the internet is easier said than done these days. But certainly things like antivirus. Antivirus is clearly not a threat, or is not a threat in an overwhelming number of situations. But things like fake information is a threat. It is fraud. Things like phishing is a threat. Malware is a threat, along with much more sinister items, such as people pretending they are or something that they're not, in order to try and trick somebody to give up something, or maybe even more nefarious issues than that, and far more serious criminal issues. And I'm sure you can imagine what I'm kind of referring to with that. So those are 3. There's another 2 on the next page. These are more bullet points. You do not have to talk about every single one of these bullet points, but obviously impacts on individual. And you will find, guys, that some of these cross over. If you're looking at social issues, those could clearly be individual issues, okay? But Smarter Planet could have things such as health. Now, I personally wear a smartwatch, which tells me how many steps I've done. It tells me things like I should be active at a certain time. It can be quite useful with that. I'm sure there's lots of other examples of health aids. I know people who wear patches for diabetes, which then sends information to their phone, and it then tells people you're having a sugar spike or whatever it might be, or these foods have this effect on your body, which can obviously be quite useful. There's a whole range of different stuff that you guys can look at, and indeed many of you have looked at health devices in the past for previous units you can potentially talk about. Labour saving basically means you have less jobs to do. Time saving means that a job that may have taken 2 hours in the past now takes half an hour. Flexibility is referring to things like you have more ways of achieving a certain goal. And accessibility means that, it means one of 2 things really. It means either you can have a greater range of different things that you can access, or it means that people with a range of physical disabilities are able to access products, which both are perfectly true. You got lifestyles on there, and like I said, this does cross over, okay, because ultimately lifestyles will have an effect on individuals. And you've got another health bullet point on there. This is what the awarding body have given me. Okay, this is straight off the spec, so this is not stuff that I have made up. So they have literally given me health twice, but it is a good thing that you can talk about. You've got comfort, so are you able to potentially have a more comfortable lifestyle? I guess you could talk about things like, I've told you before, but I have a robot hoover that can do my hoovering while I'm at work. There are various different people who have like smart heating systems at home, whatever it might be. Travel could be. I can tell you that I have smart items in terms of on my phone related to when I get the train, for example, which tells me when certain trains are running, platforms they're coming from. Um, I guess if you've also got smart devices in terms of the scooters, which are certainly interesting. Communication, social media, I've mentioned those previously. So you could quite easily write 3,000 words on each of these. Okay, not on each of them combined. You could easily do 3,000 words. I'm not looking for you to do 3,000 words. This is what the impacts for D1 say. And actually, it's largely similar to what you've previously spoken about. So you've got principles about impact of global society. So what you're going to do with information. So digital safety, freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is a completely it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as freedom of speech. At some point, somebody's going to tell you to shut up, or somebody's going to you're going to do something that's going to seriously annoy somebody, and you're going to end up with very few teeth left afterwards. So freedom of speech is like largely it's a figurative thing, I think you could say. But I guess you have the ability to say certain things, maybe not everything. Interconnectivity. So again, I've got social media and mobile devices. Those are things that I came up with in terms of information interconnected. Those two bullet points, the information interconnected to what the awarding body are giving me, they're a bit vague, I'll be honest. You've got focus and objectives. So what is the purpose of all this stuff? What is the focus of some of these things, and what are the objectives? What do they hope to achieve from this? And the relevance of them. So, why are they still relevant? How are we going to keep them relevant? How are we going to make sure that what we are doing needs to be done? That sort of thing. I'm rushing through, so I've got about 1.5 minutes left on this recording. So this task, okay, like I said, you can do it one of two ways. You can either do the P2 first and then put your D1 section afterwards, or you can combine them together. Either way is cool. To be honest, it will probably help me grade it if you have them separate, because I won't need to go hunting so much for the D1, but you could put it together should you find that easier. If you're going to try and achieve both of them, I'm going to be looking for about 1,300 to 1,500 put them together, or 750 really for P2 alone. So if we go back here, you're looking for about 150 for each one of these items, give or take a few words, which will take you to about 600. And you may want to try and add a couple of bits more on top of that, just to bring you to 750 in total. But if you're going to add the D1 on top of that, again, you're going to be looking at probably an extra 500 to 600 on top of it. So the P2 itself is not a massively onerous task. If you add it together with the D1, it may be a little bit more. You've got to remember to add references in there as per usual, because a lot of this stuff, there's some quite strong opinions out there. I'm going to end this recording because I am approaching 15 minutes, and that's my cutoff time for this software. We will be looking at further criteria very shortly, and hopefully we can get this unit done reasonably painlessly. But I look forward to reading your ideas for these criteria.